so happy when I got it. What happens in the autograph lines is couples come to me with that DVD, and inevitably, if it's a straight guy-girl couple, the girl's like, this is one of my favorite shows, and I keep trying to get him to watch it. And I say to the boyfriend, I'm like, dude, don't let the title fool you. This show is badass. It's really good. And hopefully, and I have talked to some dudes who are like dudes, and they're like, yeah, I have to admit, that's a pretty cool show. It's a stupid name, but it's a cool show. I'm like, yes, exactly. Anyway, it's just, that's probably in my top 5 of shows I would say. Yeah.
Hello, I'm Rosie Vision, and I'm setting out on a mission to bring shows aimed towards mostly female audiences that aren't really talked about that much under a rose-colored spotlight. Today's video is a really special one for me because I'm going to talk about what I would consider to be my favorite anime of all time. Now, does that mean that I think this is a perfect show, completely unworthy of criticism? Not quite. While there are better shows out there, I think this anime is a masterpiece in terms of its writing and how much of a love letter it is to classic storytelling. The anime I want to talk about today is none other than Princess Tutu. Princess Tutu is an anime original that ran from 2002 to 2003. It was created by Ikiko Ito, a character designer and animation director, best known for her work on Sailor Moon. Tutu was directed by Shogo Komoto and Junichi Sato. Sato also directed for classic Sailor Moon as well as Ojamajo Doremi and Romeo x Juliet. The writer of Princess Tutu, Michiko Yokote, created and wrote the Mermaid Melody manga and even helped write for some really big name titles like Cowboy Bebop and Bleach. So Princess Tutu has quite the pedigree in terms of staff that helped create classic 2000s anime titles. And it shows. Princess Tutu is a finished work with 26 episodes total, which are split into 2 different parts. Act 1, Chapter of the Egg, and Act 2, Chapter of the Fledgling. This is a nod to the different acts that can commonly be found within operas and ballets. Acts are listed in concert programs you receive when seeing a live performance. Think of a program like a cheat sheet. It contains a general synopsis and summarizes each act so that anyone can follow the story. Each act is essentially its own collection of scenes that can be grouped together to fulfill a purpose within the larger narrative structure. Kind of like how the beginning, middle, and end of films feel distinctly different from one another. The 2 acts used by Princess Tutu could be seen as a nod to the Nutcracker, which also has 2 acts, and serves as one of the main inspiration for the series. Now that we got all the more boring stuff out of the way, what is the series even about? Princess Tutu in title alone sounds like quite a different show from what you actually get. I remember even my young 12 or so year old self who was obsessed with magical girl shows being put off by the title. It sounds a bit too much, doesn't it? But don't let the name fool you. I truthfully believe anyone willing to give this anime a chance, regardless of gender, personality, or even age, could easily end up falling in love with it. That said, you might want to wait a bit if you plan to watch it with really young kids. There's occasional swearing and the story gets pretty dark the second half, in true classic fairy tale fashion. Princess Tutu follows a duck who is granted a magic pendant by a man named Drosselmeyer that allows her to transform into a human girl. The girl, named Duck, or Ahiru, dances at a ballet academy and has eyes for the mysterious and apathetic Mytho. Mytho is a prince who escaped from a storybook after shattering his own heart. Duck wishes to help him and is granted the role of Princess Tutu, a graceful prima ballerina with the power to return Mytho's heart to him. But Princess Tutu is fated to turn into a speck of light and vanish if she were ever to profess her love to the prince. Furthermore, Drosselmeyer, the man who gave her the pendant, is a story writer who everyone knows to be dead. Princess Tutu follows Duck on her journey to help bring life back into the prince's eyes. The series also functions as a mystery of sorts, as we are slowly fed information about the storybook Mytho escaped from, and why the town of Gold Crown, a place full of strange occurrences and anthropomorphic creatures, is the way it is. I really would love to see more people give this anime a chance, so I'm splitting this video into 2 sections, or acts, if you will. Act 1 will be more spoiler-friendly, and Act 2 will get into some more nitty-gritty details of the plot. If you're watching this video to see if this anime is for you, and you don't want major spoilers, then just watch until the spoiler warning. But if you have already seen it, or maybe you just like living dangerously, then stick with me till the end. Okay, now let's get into why I think you should give Princess Tutu a chance. But first, a quick introduction to the rest of our cast. Fakir is another student at the dance academy Duck attends. He is extremely protective over Mytho, to the point where he doesn't want anyone else around him. Fakir is so controlling that he constantly puts down Mytho so that the prince won't do anything foolish to put himself into danger. Because of this, pretty much the whole school is terrified of Fakir. Rue is the star of the dance academy and loves Mytho desperately, even though he has no heart at all. She's constantly at odds with Fakir, as they both try to manipulate Mytho so that he'll stay by their side alone. Rue is the counterpart to Princess Tutu. Pretty early on in the series, it is revealed that Rue is also Princess Crahy. Crahy stops Tutu from giving heart shards back to the prince, because she's afraid of him loving someone else. Now that we're familiar with the main cast, let's dive into why I think you should give this series a watch. Princess Tutu is a giant love letter to classical music and ballet, as one might imagine from the title. I think that it's a great place to start if you have any interest in either topic. And even if you could care less about classical music, you're likely to build some sort of appreciation for it just from watching. It's not a requirement to know anything about classical music or ballet, but it does add extra enjoyment when you can see how much thought was put into this series. To preface, I spent all of my middle and high school years in the school orchestra as a violinist. I don't play violin as often anymore, but I still have a great appreciation for the genre, and although I'm no expert, I do have a basic understanding of classical music as a whole. I watched Princess Tutu for the first time in middle school, so I was relatively new to the world of classical music back then. So rewatching the series almost 10 years later was a completely different experience for me. I absolutely love the way classical music is incorporated into the series, and it shaped a lot of my favorite classical pieces that I still love to this day. The musical score of Princess Tutu largely consists of famous classical pieces. These pieces are pulled from suites, symphonies, ballets, as well as some standalone compositions. So there's quite a bit of variety music-wise. There's only a few original compositions found in the score, a lot of which are rearrangements or reimaginings of other classical songs. More on that soon. Each piece chosen for the series fits really well and gives a huge variety of sound. Something that I love is how every episode has its own musical theme. For example, an episode might contain mainly excerpts from Swan Lake or the Nutcracker throughout the runtime. Other episodes will feature a selected piece just once when Princess Tutu comes to save the day. So, a finale song of sorts. You can see which musical theme you should expect to hear in the secondary title of each episode, which is written in German. I don't expect too many of you can speak German, so you can easily look up the episodes on Wikipedia to find out what the English translation is. The reason why the secondary titles are in German is because this anime takes place in Germany. All the books and signs are written in German, and a lot of the folklore references are also of German origin. Even one of the main characters, Crahy, has a name based on the German word for crow. Taking it further, the town that they live in is based on an actual town in Germany, named Nordlingen. Both areas feature giant walls surrounding the town in a circular enclosure, and there are also several landmarks shared, most noticeably the Daniel Church Tower. This town may seem familiar to you, especially as an anime fan. It's speculated that Attack on Titan took inspiration from this German town as well. Apparently the manga for Attack on Titan came out 6 years after Princess Tutu ended, so take that as you will. I really love just how far the creators went to make the series breathe a German atmosphere, which is only fitting considering one of the biggest influences of the anime is the Nutcracker. The book that the ballet is based on, The Nutcracker and Mouse King, was originally published in Berlin in 1816. So clearly based off of setting and music alone, Princess Tutu takes its atmosphere very seriously. Back onto the music train, a lot of the characters have their own musical theme or leitmotif that helps define who they are as a character. Clumsy and kinda scatterbrained Duck has a miniature overture from the Nutcracker as her leitmotif. You can hear different arrangements of it depending on the mood of the scene. Sometimes there's a more pondering and melancholic version. And sometimes it's way more upbeat and uses horns to sound more bird-like. To contrast this, Princess Tutu's leitmotif appears to be Waltz of the Flowers. Both pieces are highly recognizable excerpts from the Nutcracker ballet, but the waltz chosen for Tutu sounds much more elegant and refined. I love this music choice because it showcases how, despite being the same person, Duck changes her mindset and persona when she's Tutu because of how confident she feels. There are other leitmotifs as well. Drosselmeyer's is a creepy and drawn-out version of the Nutcracker March. Mythos is a dance of the Sugar Plum Fairy. Whereas Siegfried is used whenever his prince side manages to break free. Rue has a beautiful leitmotif, Gymnopédie, which will probably become one of your new favorite pieces after hearing it. It's a minimalist composition split into 3 movements, or parts, though the series just uses 1 and 2. It's what is referred to as ambient music, something you could easily put on in the background. But Gymnopédie has this irresistible charm to it because of the subtle disharmony and repetitiveness that gives it such a sorrowful feeling. It fits Rue's character perfectly, and the creators switch between movements based on whether she's Rue or Crahy. The last musical themes I'll talk about for now are Fakir's. Fakir's main musical theme is a piece by Beethoven, the Coriolan Overture, which is based on a Roman general, so it's way more intense and foreboding than his second musical theme. Mazurka in F-sharp minor, which has a really desperate fragility to it. All these music choices for the characters fit extremely well for who they are as people and what inner conflicts they go through. There are many more themes and explanations for song choices I could go over, but I'd be here all day. So let's move on. Not only does Princess Tutu use music from famous ballets and operas, but they also borrow plotlines and characters from them too. For example, Duck and Crahy are supposed to symbolize Odette and Odile from Swan Lake, whereas Mytho is Siegfried. For those of you who aren't familiar, Odette is a main character from Swan Lake, who turns into a swan. She loves Prince Siegfried, and will die if he professes his love to another. Odile, the black swan character, tries to deceive Siegfried into believing that she is really Odette, And then, of course, duck also symbolizes the ugly duckling, who's actually a beautiful swan. These references go beyond even just the main characters, as a lot of the side plots and side characters are pulled from ballets, operas, and other classical compositions, like A Midsummer Night's Dream, The Bartered Bride, Giselle, and Coppelia. You don't need to be familiar with these works to enjoy the series, but spotting these references sprinkled throughout the series is definitely a fun bonus. And it can also inspire you to learn more about some of these works as well, so it's a win-win either way. I can't speak to ballet too much since I don't know that much about it, but it really looks like the animators did their homework. The dance sequences are very well done, and from my eyes look pretty darn accurate. Not only that, but they use actual choreography from famous ballets throughout the series. The way that ballet is used in Princess Tutu is really well done in my opinion. There are never dance sequences just for the sake of it to kill time. Whenever a dance scene comes on screen, there's a purpose behind it. The writers borrowed the storytelling techniques that ballets use, but added inner dialogue to make it more palpable for modern audiences. Dance scenes can be showing how two characters are growing distant from each other, two characters trying to psych each other out, or a touching moment when one character emotionally lifts up another. Dance is used in so many different ways in Princess Tutu, and it just feels natural and tells the story in a way simple words alone can't. I can't really do these scenes justice, but if you've seen the series, then I'm sure you know what I mean. Princess Tutu also pulls from folklore and fairy tales. Every episode starts with a story read to us by a faceless narrator. Some of these stories are pulled from the musical selections used in the series, like Cinderella or Sleeping Beauty. But other times, we'll hear stories that are about the characters themselves. Regardless of origin, each story told to us gives us a better glimpse into the world Princess Tutu builds up, and an insight into the inner thoughts of the characters as well. It's a really clever story writing device, which makes Tutu feel more like a nostalgic storybook we'd have read to us as children. The stories told are also rather grim and bleak, which sets the stage perfectly for what kind of show you're in for. Honestly, I think the number one draw of this series has to be the writing. At its core, Princess Tutu is a story about fate and the roles assigned to us. The way the characters react to the situation they're put in is fascinating to watch. I won't go into too much detail yet because that'd take the fun out of it for new watchers, but I'm still incredibly surprised that this anime came out about 20 years ago. The storytelling is both traditional and incredibly innovative at the same time, and honestly is the best case of meta storytelling that I've come across personally. I also absolutely love the characters themselves and the bonds they share. At first glance, they don't really appear as anything special, but all of the main cast changes drastically from start to finish and in a really organic way. There isn't a single character that I don't care for and want to see happy and succeed. And the main cast is far from perfect. They do some pretty despicable things from time to time. But by the end of the series, you come to understand that all the characters are victims of something larger than themselves. So it's really rewarding to see them grow and change from their hardships and struggles. Before wrapping up this first section, I also want to mention the opening for this series. It's one of my personal favorites. The visuals treat the opening as the start to a performance, curtains and all, and the opening treats each character like a cast member. which is very fitting for the story. The song itself is super serene and mixes in Waltz of the Flowers in a way that makes me smile each time I hear it. If you're a fan of shoujo or slice of life anime, then you may recognize the singer. Ritsuko Okuzaki was a singer and songwriter who wrote and performed songs for several big shoujo titles, but most noticeably the opening and ending to the original Fruits Basket anime. She has a really soft voice and great musical expression that I've yet to hear anything like. She unfortunately passed away in 2004, just a few years after writing the opening and ending for Princess Tutu. Even to this day, I still see so many people come back to the songs that she wrote, and I definitely hold Princess Tutu's opening, Morning Grace, and For Fruits Basket close to my heart. They have a bittersweet feel to them, yet still make me feel at peace, and I'm glad I'm not alone in feeling that way. If you haven't seen Princess Tutu yet, I highly recommend it. It's a perfect amalgamation of fairy tale and classic storytelling that is told in a way that makes you nostalgic for a story you've never heard before. It is also incredibly inventive with the type of storytelling that it uses. As a quick comparison, if you enjoyed the early seasons of Once Upon a Time, then you'd probably absolutely love Princess Tutu. I know people have mixed feelings about the show, but I'm pretty sure most people can agree that Once Upon a Time had a great beginning premise. Princess Tutu is that premise, but executed much better and with great style too. I personally like both shows, but I am near certain that the writers for Once Upon a Time borrowed from Princess Tutu, and sadly their execution just wasn't as good, at least in the long run. So if you've been missing some fairy tale magic with a hint of darkness and mystery in your life, then Princess Tutu is a show for you. Go watch it. I don't think you'll be disappointed. The first act is slower than the second, as a heads up, but I still wouldn't really call any of it filler, since each episode is still important to the overall story. There's also an amazing English dub for those of you who are interested. I stopped watching dubs personally, but I can't let go of the English cast for this anime in particular. Both casts, Japanese or English, are great, so just go with what works for you. And that's all I have for the spoiler-friendly section, so if you don't want major spoilers, then now's the time to stop the video. Spoilers ahead! Act 2, start. I could not end this video without going into more depth on how I feel about Princess Tutu and just how well told the story is. Let's circle back to the meta storytelling, shall we? It's quite clear based off of the visual imagery of clocks and gears, as well as the musical allusions to Coppelia, a story of a man who falls in love with a dancing doll, that the characters of Gold Crown are nothing more than puppets that Drosselmeyer manipulates. He's a pretty formidable villain, considering he'll stop at nothing to make sure that he gets to see the ending to a horribly great tragedy, regardless of the consequences. Duck, Fakir, and Rue steadily realize that they were never fighting against the Raven from the story, but the story they've been forced into instead. There are many details that point to Goldcrown being nothing more than an imaginative playground to Drosselmeyer. For starters, Duck seems to be the only one who questions why there's so many human-like animals around her at first. Also, whenever Duck transforms into Princess Tutu, there's always a spotlight shining down upon her, like this was an actual performance. The camera shots also become increasingly more cinematic, and the world of Goldcrown turns more into a background setting than anything else, where detail is less clear and lights can be turned on or off. Also, no one ever leaves Goldcrown. This doesn't really become apparent till later in the series, but when a traveling music troupe visits, they momentarily question if their leader was always an electric eel, implying that the town made him that way. Also, apparently the story was right in front of us this entire time, hiding in plain sight. Drosselmeyer created a device that would allow him to write even after death, and this device is located within the clock tower we've seen shown so many times. Even the school clock that shows up occasionally points to the storybook aspects of the town. The silhouettes of a knight, duck, prince, and princess can be seen popping out of the clock. These symbolize Fakir, Duck, Mytho, and Rue respectively. I'm not sure how you tie this in to the meta storytelling, but I also love the detail of how Princess Tutu appears as a giant white swan to anyone not within the story's main cast. The fourth wall breaks are also a lot of fun to watch. There's one point where Rue acknowledges Drosselmeyer and asks him for a stage for her to battle against Tutu. And at the very end of the series, Drosselmeyer wonders if he is simply a character within someone else's story as well. You can tell that the writers of the story put thought into crafting this world, and had a lot of fun with it too. The choice to make Fakir forego his sword in favor of a pen was a cool way to illustrate how the cast of Princess Tutu are fighting against something intangible, and a playful reference to the pen versus sword debate. I also really want to talk more about the characters. I find all of the main cast quite interesting individually, but I was able to see different sides to them that I didn't notice before. For starters, Duck. I really thought that she didn't change that much the first few times I watched, but I was wrong. She started off as almost like a satire on the female characters we've come to associate with fairy tales. Duck instantly falls for Mytho and is willing to give anything, even her life, for him. As the series goes on, her feelings for Mytho seem to only grow. However, Duck realizes that she has her own hopes and desires completely separate from Mytho. She wants to remain a girl and live out her life with her friends, and dance to her heart's content. And towards the last few episodes, Duck starts to question what she should do and why. All her actions were purely based on Mytho in the beginning, and even Drosselmeyer acknowledges this. That's why he chose her, because she was the perfect pawn to sacrifice for his great tragic ending. But Duck changes from someone who's willing to sacrifice herself for someone who doesn't really know who she is, to a strong character that realizes that she has her own selfish desires, and she even learns to accept her true self, and knows that while Princess Tutu is a reflection of herself, Tutu is still far off from who she really is. Duck really is a perfect telling of the ugly duckling, and a truly endearing character. Speaking of which, the connection that Duck and Fakir share is really touching. They started off as enemies due to them misunderstanding each other and the situation that they were in, but they end up closer than any other pair of characters on the show. Fakir can only write stories that come true if they're about Duck, and he's the only one that truly sees her for the heroine that she really is. Also, Fakir writes furiously to save Duck from danger, even after having to stab his own hand. They also share this sort of telepathic connection as well. Fakir and Duck are able to communicate with one another on multiple occasions, even when separated by different dimensions and space. And I cannot talk about things I love about Princess Tutu without mentioning my favorite scene, the Lake of Despair, Pas de Dieu, between Fakir and Duck. I'm sure I'm not alone on this one. Duck runs away after being unable to give up the last heart shard to the prince, because she doesn't want the story to end. Drosselmeyer sends her off to a fictional set, the Lake of Despair, where she sinks to the bottom of the lake to sulk in her own misery. But since the lake is nothing more than a set, she can still breathe. Fakir rushes after her to console her, and the pair dance a pas de deux to acknowledge and accept their fear and sadness over the inevitable end to the story. Fakir knows nothing of the world but the role that was assigned to him, so he's also afraid of who he really is, and if he's truly capable of protecting anyone. But he's still willing to accept his true self. Duck doesn't want to lose the life that she's been living, but Fakir lets her know that she's not the only one, and that it's up to them to save the people of Gold Crown. He assures her that she'll never be alone, because he'll stay by her side. Also, the musical theme that's used for this scene is from Romeo and Juliet. which is so fitting considering the fact that Fakir and Duck were enemies who ended up nearly becoming lovers, but alas, fate keeps them apart. I won't lie, this scene always makes me cry like a baby. It's such a genuine moment that I think most people can relate to, and it's so touching to see just how much these two have come to care for one another. The dance aspect of it adds to the scene in a way that words cannot, and pays respect to the kind of storytelling that only ballet can tell. This is the last dance that Duck will ever get as a human girl, and she's never danced with Fakir, save one time when they were still enemies. And Duck doesn't dance as Tutu either. She dances as her true self. She was always super self-conscious about her dance skills, and envied how easily and beautifully Princess Tutu was able to dance. So seeing her dance so gracefully, but also with such bittersweet sadness and joy as her true self is quite emotional to watch. This is the real finale of the series in my eyes. It's when the two heroes of the story come together and accept their true selves, as well as vow to fight against the cruel fate to which they were assigned. I kind of underestimated the characters of Rue and Mytho when first watching as well. I remember not liking Rue as much once the second act started, but after looking back, I think it was much too hard on her. The only thing that Rue is guilty of is being someone who's afraid of losing love. Her character is truly heartbreaking. She was kidnapped as a young girl and led to believe that no one could ever truly love her, save the prince from the story. And despite drinking Raven's blood, she still holds on to her honest love for the prince. Raven's blood makes feelings of love and compassion turn to pain and suffering, so the more you love, the more pain you feel. Truly a poetically tragic fate. It's clear just how much Rue has been suffering, and seeing her terrified when she starts becoming crazy is very painful to watch. It's clear she is no villain, just a pawn of the Raven and Drosselmeyer, so I was overjoyed to see her get a much-deserved happy ending. As for the prince, obviously his character is inherently less interesting than the rest of the cast. He lost his heart after all, and is thrown around like a puppet. But I loved how even when he lost all feeling, he still held on to the belief of protecting those weaker than him. The moment the prince realizes that a mere tiny duck was responsible for all the great good that Tutu accomplished leaves me full of tears each time. Even throughout all his suffering, the prince never forgot what he holds most dear, and all that he ever believed in after shattering his own heart is finally validated once he sees Tutu for who she really is. And the prince respects her incredibly, so much that he bows his head to her. All things considered, I think the writers did a good job with Mytho. He's a character from a story who doesn't feel anything for most of the series, yet there's still some depth and uniqueness to him. The ending to Princess Tutu is pretty polarizing. Regardless of whether you love or hate it, one thing is for sure, it's an emotional finale. I wholeheartedly agree that Duck deserved better, but I just can't bring myself to hate the ending either. Mytho and Rue go into the storybook together, the town goes back to normal, and Duck is left as nothing more than a bird, but she has Fakir by her side. A classically bittersweet fairy tale ending, if ever I heard one. As much as it pains me, I really do think the ending fits the tone of the series. It fits right in with a lot of fairy tale classics I grew up loving, including The Little Mermaid. At least Duck isn't alone and gets to be her true self. I don't know if it's me grasping onto false hope, but I feel like it's also implied that Duck may get to be a human girl again, or at least some kind of happy ending for her, considering that the ending shot is her with Fakir, and Fakir is writing. He also mentioned how he would take over Drosselmeyer's story as well, so maybe a new story is just beginning for Duck and Fakir. At least that's how I choose to see it. Not a sad an ending if you think of it that way, more like an open ending more than anything else. Literally anything could happen, considering Fakir has a power to influence reality. What do you think? Okay, I better start wrapping up now. I could have easily made a video where I talk about Princess Tutu for hours. There's still a lot I wasn't able to talk about, but I wanted to at least put some sort of video out there. Princess Tutu doesn't get that much attention by most anime watchers, so I wanted to add to the discussion somehow. Go ahead and let me know what your thoughts on the show are. I'd love to hear from you all. Also, if you're a fan of the anime and would love to see it continue, I highly recommend checking out a fan-made continuation named Princess Tutu Zwei, made by Nocturnal Impala. There's currently 2 episodes out on YouTube. I was blown away by just how great the quality is story-wise and animation-wise, and it's all done by only one person. It honestly feels like an actual sequel. It felt like I was watching Princess Tutu for the first time again. Be sure to check it out and show the creator some love. I'll have the first episode linked in the description, and I'll add an end card too. That's all I have to say about Princess Tutu for now. Next video I upload will be a ranking of all the Winx Club transformations from Season 1 through Season 8, plus World of Winx. And after that, I'm thinking of possibly making a video on Lolly Rock, so keep an eye out for those. If you'd like to join me for the journey to come, then please subscribe. Hope you'll look forward to it. Till next time.